Hello, welcome to my 1 year review of V85TT ownership. As a reminder, I had a V73 before this bike, which was a great bike, and I loved the air-cooled shaft drive simplicity, but it just wasn't comfortable for me personally. So after a couple of years, I part-exchanged it for my V85TT without even a test ride. Did I make a mistake? Stick around to find out. Okay, for the impatient types, the headline review is, do I regret buying this bike at all? No. Are there things that could be improved? Of course. Do I plan to keep this bike for the foreseeable future? Yes. Okay, right, now everyone else has gone and there's just the three of us left, let's crack on. Okay, for the most part, I think Guzzi have done a pretty good job here. There's quite a good balance between features and simplicity. For example, yes, like most bikes, it has a menu system for various settings, but pretty much everything you want to do whilst riding can be accessed by a physical button. I have mentioned the layout of controls in my previous quirks video, and if I can work out how to do a card somewhere on the screen, I'll do that. If not, I'll put it down below. So the bike has basic traction control and ABS. Now some people think these things are unnecessary and it should all be down to rider skill. Well, if you're on a racetrack maybe, or you ride like a twat everywhere, maybe so. But these days I like to know there's a gentle electronic arm around my shoulder, just ready to gently guide me back onto course if I make a mistake. I've done a few experiments on poor surfaces, and while there's none of the fancy modern cornering ABS or 5-axis IMU malarkey on this bike, it does a pretty good job of only cutting in when provoked. In normal riding it's not intrusive at all. There are 3 modes on these original bikes: road, rain and off-road. I know the newer bikes have 1 or 2 more, but I'm more than happy with these 3. Generally, of course, you ride in road mode. I do switch to rain when the conditions are a bit slippery. As far as I can tell, it maybe softens the throttle a little bit and cranks up the traction control and ABS a notch just to make them cut in slightly earlier. I've ridden on some very icy roads as a test and it worked very well. The off-road mode I've used once or twice on gravel tracks and to get up here today. I think it allows a bit more wheel spin and disables the rear ABS. Other than that, not really sure what else it does. I really like the cruise control and the fact the entire thing works off a single button. Once you learn it, I find it really simple to use. Other manufacturers could learn from that, to be fair. The lights are pretty good, but I don't know if they were set too high from factory or if it's just the design, but they were pretty antisocial on the dip beam. Quite dazzling for other riders and other people on the road. I have angled them down a fair bit to try and compensate for this. And also, as I've said before, the fog lights don't really add much to distance, but they are very good on a narrow country lane at lighting up the sides of the bike all around you. There are a few niggles. The display is too bright at night. There's only a single brightness setting, so if I know I'm going to be riding for a while in the dark, I'll go into the menu and knock it down to number 1 on brightness. Like all bikes from the factory, the horn is too weedy, It's loud enough, but it's too high pitched. I used to fit Fiam low note horns to all my bikes, but there's not really room on here to neatly fit one. There's no room around the original horn, and I don't really want to bolt something to the engine bars, which is what most people do when they're trying to upgrade it, to be fair. So what about the chassis and the general running gear on the bike? No complaints here. It's functional, seems to work well. I'm enjoying the lack of chain maintenance, though shaft drives are not without their issues, typically extra weight and sapping away some power. I believe some V85s have been prone to oil leaks from the final drive, though the internet tells me it's often caused by either too much oil or a blocked breather, so I'll just keep an eye on that. I've also heard that on the 85 the rear wheel is a lot easier to get out than it is on the V7, which is a good thing. So the engine on my bike is smooth, and there's only one fueling issue that I've experienced, and it's the same as it was on the V7. When the engine is cold, it doesn't want to pull smoothly. It really benefits from letting it tick over for a minute before setting off. If you try and set off straight away on a cold engine, it's just, yeah, very fluffy, but it doesn't take long to warm up. Other than that, I've had no issues with surging at low speeds or any other fueling issues or pinking or anything like that. I do tend to run on UK E5 fuel, which is typically 97 octane. Not because I think it gives more power, rather it just seems that less ethanol in the fuel is probably a good thing for all kinds of reasons that are all over the internet. By the way, the bike does of course run absolutely fine on UK E10 95 octane, so you could put it down to superstition on my part potentially. It's quite a revvy engine, it's not a huge torque monster. A lot of reviews say it needs more power. I say it depends. It's absolutely fine for everyday riding, touring, commuting, that sort of thing. It's only really if you're travelling at speed and you want to do a quick overtake, then maybe a bit more get up and go would be nice, but normal everyday riding, absolutely no issue. It's absolutely fine. And in fact, on a gravelly track like the one I'm on today, it's quite nice not having too much power. It's much easier to control on the throttle. It is still possible if you flub a gear change to get the clutch slipping, and you can certainly tell that's happened because you'll detect the aroma of angry clutch plates, or clutch plate in this case, if you abuse it. So don't do that, just sit back and enjoy the ride. If you want to tear strips off the tarmac, just get a Multistrada. This isn't the bike for you. Talking of which, much like my old 1000DS Multistrada, it doesn't always get hot enough in the winter to keep moisture out of the engine oil, and you can sometimes get a bit of mayonnaise in the sight glass. Those of you somewhere warmer than the UK presumably don't have this issue. I'd be interested to hear from people from colder countries whether they actually see that problem or not. Gearbox is fine. It is possible to flub the shifts if you're lazy. You do need to tell it what gear to go into. You don't ask it politely, you tell it on this bike, and then it's fine. Having said that, I did discover the other day that it will clutchless shift up very smoothly under hard acceleration, which was a nice surprise. So what about sort of ride handling, comfort, ergonomics, that sort of thing? Well, again, as I've said in other videos, it's all day comfy for the most part. The suspension is basic, but it seems to handle a terrible UK roads okay. Screens are a hot topic on the interwebs. I'm in the buffeting camp, in which, with this touring screen that comes as standard on the Travel, I do get smacked around the head at about 60 miles an hour by the wind buffeting. As you can see, I've added a crappy little cheap spoiler off of that eBay, which does help. I think it all depends how tall you are, really. And I don't think the bike is particularly aerodynamic. I think it just punches its way through the air, so that might be some of the cause. Just so much turbulent air around the cylinders and the beak and everything else. The screen does cause a couple of issues though, a couple of other issues. I did discover there's a big sort of negative pressure or backdraft area behind the screen. I only noticed this when I put a rain cover over my tank bag one day just to see it remove itself at high speed upwards and disappear off into the wild blue yonder. So yeah, there are some weird atmospheric effects behind the screen, shall we say. That might be common on all bikes with big screens, I don't know. Secondly, on a hot day, yes, we do sometimes get them in Wales, there's not a lot of cooling airflow, especially in slow traffic. And likewise on a rainy day, it's quite hard to keep your visor clear. Sometimes I have to stand up or tilt my head to the side just to get some clear airflow. I think in the ideal world it would have either a screen with quite a lot of up and down adjustment, or, like I've seen some people do, put a small screen on for the summer and the big screen on for the winter. I haven't bothered. It's not that bad that it's made me want to change it, but it's certainly something I might consider in the future. A final note on ergonomics. I mentioned the quirky switchgear in a previous video, but the engine kill switch has caught me out once or twice. It's really not obvious if you accidentally press it while moving the bike around. It was definitely designed by Hot Black Desiato, that's for sure. After about 5,000 miles. We're down to about 3mm tread front and rear on the middle of the tyre. The internet thinks you should get about 8 to 12,000 miles out of a set, so we'll see how that goes. I'm on about 5,500 miles now, so it sounds like that's kind of possible. It's obviously going to entirely depend on your riding that you do. I'm very happy with the Anarchy Adventure tyres so far. They've worked well in all weathers on the road, and they do okay on gravelly tracks like this one as well. They're definitely not an off-road tyre in the sense that I think of them, but you know, they're okay for mostly road and maybe some very light off-roading. On balance, if they continue like this as they wear, I'll be happy to fit them again. The front is cupping a bit, so I'll try and get some photos of that, and the rear is nicely squared off, but the handling is still fine at the moment. I guess we'll have to wait and see as they wear a bit more what happens. Now, these are tubed wheels. That still makes me a little nervous, purely because you can't plug the tyre easily at the side of the road. However, and I shouldn't say what I'm about to say because karma is probably going to bite me in the arse on the way home, but in nearly 30 years of riding I've never had to plug a tyre, so perhaps I should just stop worrying about it and just ride the bike, basically. I have put a product called Bike Seal in the tubes. Other similar products are available. It may help if I get a puncture. They reckon it's sort of 75% effective in tubed versus tubeless tyres. I'm not expecting miracles. Again, I just put it in there to kind of make myself feel better, if I'm honest. It has had no effect on handling or wheel balance that I can detect either, which is nice. Yes, I am aware a lot of people do the DIY tubeless conversion, and I thought about it, watched a lot of videos, and on balance I'm not comfortable with doing that. If you've done it and it works for you, then great, but if I was going to do anything, I would fit the tubeless wheels and have the proper designed wheels for it. I did consider buying them for this bike, but I think on balance it's over £1,000 and probably a year's wait at the moment, so again, it doesn't bother me that much. The brakes, well, they're Brembos, pretty standard fitment on most Italian bikes, I think. They're absolutely fine, they work well. I have noticed there's a little bit of, they do pump up a little bit. What I mean by that is the first squeeze, there's quite a lot of movement in the lever, and if you let go and squeeze again, they're much firmer. I've had that on plenty of other bikes, so it doesn't really worry me. I don't know if it's something that can be dialed out by bleeding them or changing the fluid, or if it's just the way they are, but it's not a big deal, it's just something I've noticed. So the standard kit on the travel model is pretty good. You get heated grips, bigger screen, spotlights, phone navigation interface, MIA, and panniers. All of the above are worth having in my opinion, apart from the MIA phone integration. Why? Well, you have to install a crappy app which uses the old Here maps that used to be on the Nokia Maps app. You can download the maps to your phone, so you don't need a phone signal whilst navigating, and the navigation screen looks rather nice in my opinion. The downside is that there are far better navigation apps out there, and also the free license only lasts for 2 or 3 years, something like that, which, given that Nokia Maps used to be free, I think is a bit cheeky. It would be so much better if you could just use any other nav app and have it integrate with the nav screen. I've not used it for comms or phone calls, so I can't comment on how well that works, but if it was me now, I probably wouldn't pay the extra to have it fitted. As I said in another video, I've bolted on a lot of extra crap to this bike, almost without realising it really. A quick summary: I've added a front fender with the extender, a rear hugger, a mud deflector, engine bars, Kappa Nord hand deflectors, the screen deflector, top box plate, tank bag mount, and the Gimper Garage sat-nav or device rail at the top. Half of these things were kind of designed for comfort in the UK, where the weather's quite crap a lot of the time, especially here in Wales. Just trying to stop the bike getting too dirty when I'm out riding and to keep the weather off me. They've mostly failed at that, but hey, it is what it is. Okay, the main issue for where I live, and lots of other places by the sound of it, is the small dealer network. For my first service, I took it to a dealer here in Wales, one that by all accounts is popular and well regarded. Unfortunately, I didn't have a great experience with them. They were hard to get hold of, they didn't reply to messages, and when I got it back from the service, they hadn't reset the service indicator light, which was a bit annoying. So I complained about that before I left, and they took the bike away and spent 45 minutes fiddling with it out the back and still couldn't reset the service light. And this is a Moto Guzzi dealer, by the way. Added to that, a couple of days later I was at home and I was checking the bike over, and I noticed that they either didn't replace or didn't tighten one of the spark plug cover screws, so that was missing completely. And I did complain to them, and they kind of implied it wasn't their fault, but in the end they begrudgingly said they'd send me another screw to replace it. which they never did. I ended up buying one myself online. Again, it's only a little small screw, but it's just annoying that they didn't have that attention to detail, in my opinion. Plus, it was like a 140-mile round trip to that dealer, so I won't be going back there. For my second service, I took it back to where I bought it. And this is a 5-hour trip each way at least. As far as I can tell, the service was done okay, and they did reset the service indicator. Nothing was missing or loose or broken on the bike when I got it back. I checked it very carefully. They did one small thing that did leave a real bad taste in my mouth, and probably means I'll never spend any money with them ever again. So if you bother to look at any of the videos on my channel, you'll notice I've made lots of videos about these urban panniers. And one of the issues was the hinge pins, a known problem that Moto Guzzi knew about. The pins are too short, they fell out on some bikes. As far as I'm concerned, that's a warranty issue. The dealer wasn't convinced until I sent them loads of internet links to the various recalls, and then they sent me some pins. They didn't ask for any money, they just said, okay, fine, here's some pins, we'll send you all the ones we've got in stock. So I thought, great, sorted. And it was several months later when I got the bike serviced, and I was checking the invoice after I'd got home, and I noticed they'd quietly added the cost of the pins to the bill. Now, it was only around 12 quid or so, but that's not the point. I think that's a bit of a dick move, if I'm honest. You know, you pay a lot of money for these bikes and you expect them to work properly, and if there are known problems, you expect the dealers to sort them out. And that pissed me off, if I'm honest. It's only 12 quid, I should just suck it up, forget about it, but it's the principle really. It did annoy me. Therefore, if anyone can recommend a dealer anywhere in the UK that they think is excellent, I'm listening, because I will pretty much travel anywhere to get this serviced at the moment. So we're getting to the end now, you'll be glad to hear. What would improve this bike? What would I like to be different? What would tempt me to the newer model? Well, the big one, as I've briefly mentioned, is the tubeless wheels. Notwithstanding my previous comments, it would be a nice peace of mind to have them. And I realise it's just about the feeling of security, really. Other than that, not much. The newer bikes have a few extra riding modes and some tweaks to power and torque for the Euro 5 regs, I believe. But there's nothing that would tempt me to upgrade this bike. I'm quite happy with the older model. In summary then, as I said at the start, this bike does everything I want it to. I'm very happy with it. No plans to change it. I've enjoyed my year and a bit that I've had the bike so far, even though it's not done as many miles as perhaps I might have intended. Mind you, if they bring out a V85TT, that might be worth a look. Could be interesting. Anyway, I hope there was something of interest in this review. Comment, like, dislike, subscribe, all that jazz. I enjoy getting comments because it means at least someone is watching this stuff, so it's worth making these videos. Anyway, thanks for watching. Maybe see you next time. You know, there are worse places to live than round here. I have to remind myself of that sometimes.